fellas, we got a build today for the Warlock subclass. That's right. Taking advantage of the new solo changes to Top Tree Warlock. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, kind of nice wearing a dress, you know? Every now and then when I just want to get in touch with my feminine side, just get on the Warlock class, twirl a little bit in the air, and I feel like a princess all over again. You know what I'm saying? Now today, fellas, we are actually taking the exotic special hand cannon, Ariana's Vow, combined with the exotic gauntlets, Claws of Ahamkara, and merging it with Top Tree, Attunement of Sky. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Celestial Ahamkara. Oh, baby. Don't you just love to say it, man? Just Ahamkara. It's actually the right pronunciation. Now let's get into the build. First up, that's right, guys, we're taking advantage of Celestial Fire. You send out a spiral of 3 explosive solar energy blasts. So these things actually have some tracking to them. I don't know the extent of the tracking. I'm guessing anywhere between 20-25 meters. And then after that point, it doesn't necessarily have tracking. It seems to just kind of whiz past enemies. But currently right now, Celestial Fire by itself hits 35 damage per tick for a total of 105 damage. Not a bad melee, but in this season, it can get even juicier. Because when we combine it here with Solar Plexus, the artifact mod, it increases our damage of all of our solar melee abilities. It actually increases our damage to 44 damage per tick for a total of 132 damage with one melee. And not just any melee, guys, a tracking melee. Now the name of the game is to get these melees off as much as we possibly can, which is why we brought the exotic gauntlets Claws of Ahamkara into the fold, which gives us the exotic perk, the Whispers. Very simple, guys, it just gives us an extra melee charge. This results in us being able to actually double melee in the air from 20 to 25 meters, and you could actually just get a kill back to back. But this is when we bring Ariana's Vow into the fold, because I needed a weapon that not only did good crit shot damage, but a weapon that gave me some forgiveness. Now, Ariana's Vow actually comes with the perk Looks Can Kill. The weapon fires special, sheared piercing ammunition. It also comes with a scope, specifically strong against barrier champions. Now, I actually have the Catalyst on mine. It actually increases the magazine size to 9, and you get auto-loading holster. But the big trait is the Death at First Glance trait, where you gain bonus damage when aiming down sights on the opening shot of an attack. This bonus is preserved if the shot deals precision damage or strikes an elemental shield. Now that damage actually drops pretty significantly when you don't have first glance, going from 167 per crit to 124 without, and 104 per body to 78 damage without. Either way it goes, whether we actually get damage with first glance or without, and whether or not it's a crit shot or a body shot, it really doesn't matter here, as our melee with Solar Plexus is doing 132 damage. So even on the lowest damage of Ariana's Vow at 78, we'll still be able to kill Guardians at max resilience, which is what we're trying to do here, guys. We're trying to lead into an engagement, pop a body shot off with something like Ariana's Vow, and clean up with our tracking melee. And there's something to say about that melee. That melee has tracking, and it does a really good job, but I do advise that you lead your targets. I found once I got better at actually leading those targets, the tracking worked a lot better and resulted in all of those little fire spirals actually making contact, because that can happen too. Sometimes only like one spiral or maybe even 2 out of the 3 spirals actually make contact. Now there's a number of reasons why I'm using Ariana's Vow. Number 1, when you combine it with Empowering Rifts on the Warlock class, yes, you can one-shot crit opponents at 197 damage. Now there might be some rounding in there, but for the most part, any Guardian 8 resilience or less will die from one shot from Ariana's Vow in First Glance when combined with an Empowering Rift. It's extremely deadly, and it catches a lot of people off guard, because when they go around a corner, they're not expecting to have their head taken off in an engagement that looks like a hand cannon versus hand cannon engagement. So it really takes people by surprise when Ariana's Vow actually gets the one-shot kill. And it's also a great way to lock down a territory. I know a lot of us inside of Crucible, when we play the Warlock class, really depend on the healing rift, but in this scenario, with something like Ariana's Vow, I highly advise taking advantage of Empowering Rift. But the beautiful thing about Ariana's Vow is that it has shield-piercing bullets, which also works inside of PvP, as when you combine it with the new artifact mod for this season, Breach Resonator, it states that you grant yourself melee and grenade energy on final blows with shield-piercing weapons. So let me just give you the flow chart of how things would go for me. Every match, I would go into an engagement, pop a body shot off or maybe even a crit shot off on an opponent, clean up with my melee. By that time, my second melee should be already there, and then I do the same thing again. If, however, I find myself myself in a situation where I am waiting to get my melee, I pop down an Empowering Rift and proceed to one-shot opponents with Ariana's Vow, proccing Breach Resonator, thus resulting in me getting my melee back pretty swiftly, and then we're back to the races. All of this, of course, is being combined with 100 strength here for that pretty quick 32-second cooldown in our melee. And the beautiful thing about Claws of Ahamkara is the ability to just stack up 2 melees at all times. Say you just go on like a killing spree with Ariana's Vow, you can immediately stack yourself back up to both of your melee charges. Now, I did take a time or two where I would actually go in the air and pop some shots off in opponents, and considering that this is the Attunement of Sky subclass, there's a lot of stuff here really helping us with in-air engagements. You can take advantage of things like Heat Rises, which actually gives you a 10-second period where you gain increase in-air accuracy, as well as that extended glide time. Also, airborne final kills with something like Heat Rises will extend the effect of that perk, allowing you to stay in the air longer, and if you find yourself in a sticky situation, you always have Icarus Dash to dodge back into cover. Now, some changes that I made recently, and I haven't really truly decided on which one I like the most: Strafe Glide and Burst Glide. I recently started using Strafe Glide more whenever I pop Heat Rises. Now, I honestly should depend on Heat Rises more, and I would say if you do use Heat Rises a bunch, I advise using Strafe Glide, as those two in tandem together really opens up the benefit of both mobility, movement, Warlock skating, and I think just Strafe Glide in general just feels better to me whenever I'm in air. It does say that it has stronger directional control, but it just felt like it was easier to maintain and it was easier for me to land shots. Now, the only downside to Ariana's Vow is that you cannot throw things like an Icarus mod on it, meaning that while you are in the air, the weapon does have some inaccuracies, which is why I really advise that you take advantage of something like Heat Rises and consume that grenade. And as I look at my build, I kind of wondered if I should have actually like split my discipline and my strength loadouts. Even though I'm getting some kills there with Ariana's Vow, proccing things like Breach Resonator, I was getting both my melee and my grenade back pretty quickly, but there were many times that I was waiting on my grenade, thus resulting in me not taking advantage of something like Heat Rises. Also, there are times where Heat Rises, even though it is super beneficial, it can sometimes get you in a sticky situation. It can make you get stuck to the ceiling, it can stick you out like a sore thumb. Even though it has a lot of benefits to it, it definitely has a skill curve to it that requires players to understand Warlock mobility to the highest extent, something of which I have not done much of. Actually, until this season, I really didn't even play Dawnblade that very often. But for my Warlock mains that are watching this, feel free to let me know which glide seems to pair the best there with the Attunement of Sky for you. Do you still like Burst Glide more, or do you prefer Strafe Glide? I will mention that Burst Glide, I think in general, probably is still the better mobility glide without something like Heat Rises. But if you are going to be taking advantage of Heat Rises, I noticed a significant improvement when utilizing it with Strafe Glide. So guys, that is your build there. It's nothing too complicated, nowhere near as complicated as our PvE build that we got coming up soon. We have some minor adjustments, but of course we're mixing in a few artifact mods as well as some activity mods to really blow this build up some more to make it super lethal inside of PvE. For PvP though, if you're looking to just take opponents down in a very sexy and respectable way, this is really nasty. I really enjoy this. Popping shots off with Ariana's Vow, getting the instant cleanup with the tracking melee, refreshing both our melee and grenade with final blows with Ariana's Vow, and getting the one-shot crispy snipes. It was all around a very fun build. Now, you probably noticed the sidearm. We've actually reviewed this one in the past. This is actually my max range Breach Refractor. This is actually one of my favorite sidearms and probably my favorite sidearm in that kinetic slot. As you can see there with that range stat, with the ranged masterwork and full bore, it is almost max. So having the ability to just get an instant cleanup after popping an Ariana shot into someone, there's a lot of weapons you could pair here. We used to pair like an SMG, but to me in this season, considering the target acquisition buff inside of PvP, Breach Light as well as many other sidearms are definitely contenders inside of Crucible. Well fellas, give Celestial Ahamkara a try today. I know I like to give my Warlock mains a hard time, but it's all out of love, okay? No lie, Top Tree Dawnblade probably has the highest skill ceiling out of all of these subclasses currently. Like there was a lot of times my fingers just got mixed up, man. I was hitting the wrong buttons and stuff, and it happens. But after a while, it starts to become second nature. You start to get a little more used to it. But even then, even after playing with this build for for a number of games. There's so many tricks to just learning how to maneuver on this subclass. But if you can get that down, and if you could just remember to pop things like heat rises, especially if you're taking advantage of that in-air gameplay, this build right here will greatly reward you. For any of my Warlock mains though that are watching, if you got any advice, feel free to comment it down below. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.